and welcome to another edition of 310 to Left. Tom Caron from the New England Sports Network, along with Alex Spear from the Boston Globe. It is the most wonderful time of the year if you're in baseball media. The trade deadline upon us. You just wake up with a little extra adrenaline and a little extra fire. It's changed over the years, Alex. I was thinking as we begin this episode, it was always July 31st at 4 p.m. Now they have a couple of days wiggle room. Of course, I know that because our firstborn child was born on July 31st.
Wow.
And so they traded, his favorite player every year on his birthday, which traded Nomar, traded Manny. He'd call me in tears. Who are they trading? It's my birthday this year. So happy birthday, Jack Caron. Now that he's older and is not quite as invested, they move this to the 30th. First of all, how are you, Alex? How are you doing on this trade deadline?
Well, you say that you wake up with excitement. I wake up with exhaustion. This has been a super interesting stretch for the Red Sox. I've been bouncing around. I was in Texas for the All-Star game. I was in LA for the Dodgers series, in Colorado, then coming back here on a red eye. So you're kind of all like you feel the rhythm of the baseball season, and I personally am on fumes, and so I project that onto what I imagine the front office people are doing, and also to a degree on what the players are doing with their own kind of chaotic travel coming out of the All-Star break. And it's and so then you wake up with that ding, so who's going to move? What's going to happen? At least we have a lane, right? That was identified, and
yes.
And in fact, the Red Sox have been driving in that lane, not just identifying which one they would take, which has been very interesting.
It occurs to me that you are basically our all-star, right? So you were at the all-star game. I am the proverbial non-all-star who was sitting on my deck in Maine looking at the mountains. I am totally chilled and relaxed and ready for the trade deadline.
I would push back and say that you're the all-star who's so secure in his status that you could pass on the all-star game.
So I'm Manny.
This year Devers, certainly. Yep.
Yeah, but Devers had Manny never had it planned out where he told you about the injury for 2 months before. I mean, Devers, we knew the shoulder was a real thing. Manny would be, I've got this thing and I can't go to the All-Star game because of it.
Yeah, fair. There is a degree of difference. So yes, Tom, you are Manny. Congratulations. Look forward to the episode where
Speaking of Manny, let's talk about some of our favorite trade deadline moments. I mean, I immediately go to it was the Jonathan Papelbon debut, right? When Jonathan Papelbon made his major league debut. Yeah. Was this 06? This is 06, right? 05, thank you. 2005. And for all the world, there was the belief that Manny was going to get traded. And he was not in the starting lineup. And the Red Sox are playing. It was a Sunday afternoon game on July 31st, 2005. And he came out to pinch hit after 4 o'clock. So the trade deadline had come and gone. Manny was in a uniform. The crowd went wild. He got the hit. And with his arm around Eric Fried, who was the sideline reporter at the time, said, "This is just Manny being Manny." And, it was one of those walk-offs because of a walk-off win where it was over the PA at Fenway, right? And so the crowd just roared its approval. And that's what a trade deadline is supposed to be like, Alex.
Manny made trade deadlines epic, and the whole weekend leading up to that had been insane, where we were having these pregame meetings in Terry Francona's office, and all of a sudden Kevin Millar on that Sunday morning of the trade deadline that year brings Manny into Tito's office, and Kevin Millar declares, "I'm going to be Manny's translator," and is kind of trying to be goofy and make light of the situation, and it was the whole exchange. You have Manny making a statement and Tito being "Yeah, you tell him," it was just it was so weird and so surreal. That one plus the 2008 one where Manny in fact did end up being dealt, but the Red Sox refused to announce the trade for 24 hours after the trade deadline, even though it was official. Like, I got Neil Huntington, who was the Pirates GM at the time, on the phone to talk about like having been the Jason Bay part of the trade, and like he's like, oh yeah, well, like what a weird situation for the Red Sox to be. We're talking about it on the record, and like the Red Sox still won't acknowledge it. Man, like a few of us are camped out. It's an off day for the Red Sox, so a few reporters are camped out at Fenway Park, and like we're trying to. Manny is there. Manny's in the clubhouse, and like we're trying to like camp out and get him, but he like ends up driving past us in the dead of night. Like the final moments of Manny are just like watching his car by a few onlookers, and like it was. If you want a fun deadline, like get Manny involved. Absolutely.
Well, that was, and so that that brings me to the epic NESN trade deadline specials over the year, and that was with no game. We were going off the air. I think it was getting close to 5 o'clock at that point. Trade deadline was 4, and I can't ever think of the trade deadline without thinking of Nick Cafardo, sort of over on the side. Gordon Eads had said, I think it's happening, but we were not able to get any attribution, so we were getting ready to sign off, and Nick's like, well, hang on, I think they just traded Manny. And we wound up being on the air for another 90 minutes, ruining my son's birthday party that was planned for that evening. But we got there eventually. Poor Jack. I was on the tail end of it. Yeah, the funny story there too is, I was doing hockey, right? I was a minor league hockey play-by-play guy. And Kelly and I had, decided it's time to start a family. And wouldn't it be great if we had a summer child so that wouldn't affect any of our work? And, we had Jack on July 31st. Like, this is perfect. It'll, it's the Major League trade deadline. And I spend the next 20-something years doing baseball. But that's bad planning on our part. But, you don't have to go that far back, right? 2 years ago, the Christian Vasquez deal. When I was in Houston, were you in Houston? Were you there?
I was not. I was reporting from. Okay. I was reporting from home. Yeah.
You were reporting from home. I was actually on the road trip for that one. And that was the one where he came over to talk to us, stunned, and then Red Sox media kind of pulled him away from us, and because that was. It was a good trade. Obviously, you see the results now, tremendous, right, for the Red Sox, but he was a wildly popular and important part of that clubhouse. And those are the things that can have a real effect. At the hotel the next day, his wife was trying to check in. She had flown in to meet with the babies, and she saw me and just broke down in the lobby of the hotel, because he'd been traded to Houston, so now she was coming to their new home. It was just, it's for fans, it is easy to forget the human toil that happens to players and their families this time of year. It's real, and it's why I really do believe, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, that decisions that are or are not made in these 48 hours or the weeks leading up to the trade deadline have more effect on a team than just the wins above replacement of the player coming versus who's leaving, right? The makeup of a clubhouse changes dramatically sometimes, for good or bad, and it can dictate what happens in a season.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily for the rest of them that it impacts it, but you do have ripples that are created that are maybe they're days long, maybe they're weeks on, maybe they are the rest of the season. It happens quickly. In 2009, the Red Sox at the trade deadline had a series of moves, pretty dramatic. Like they traded for Victor Martinez, they're trading out Justin Masterson. Joe Castiglione is off in the corner, not only consoling Justin Masterson, but giving him a gift certificate for a dinner. Adam LaRoche, who was a Red Sox for 9 days, was traded for Casey Kochman, and J.D. Drew looked like his lunch money had been stolen. Like there are guys who are devastated. Like Adam LaRoche was like as fast to being a popular Red Sox as there has ever been. And like who are devastated by his absence and his departure, and like Adam LaRoche is like shaking his head and being one of the greatest stretches of my career. It's like it was 9 days, but there was an emotional element. Like everything is heightened emotions, and frankly, like we saw the fight happening last week, and there's probably a little bit of that, or not the fight, but the bench is clearing, and probably some of that is informed by the fact that there are just heightened emotions at this time of year.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. Is it what? Who was the player involved in the Nomar deal? Uh, he never. He might have had a cup of coffee, but a player the Red Sox sent, and I think if the story goes right, the Twins thought they were getting him, but he was actually going to, was it the Cubs at that point? I mean, like it was there was actually confusion as to who was getting one of the players in the deal. Like that's what doesn't happen anymore, right? The flurry of names being thrown together 5 minutes before the deadline. You don't see that happen anymore.
It is far more rare, and they have a more developed computer database that's through Central Baseball. So every team that's involved in a trade has to do approve. So like if someone
It's
messes
not a
up and
fax machine jamming.
yeah, someone in baseball operations
Yeah.
is losing their job at this point if that happens.
But there are always great stories that come out of it, which leads to our guest today, which is the perfect time to talk. Because listen, by the time you listen to this or watch this, you will know what the Red Sox did or didn't do, most likely, or things are changing. So as we do this with the hours to go till the trade deadline, we thought it was the perfect time to just sort of get the psyche, right? To lift the curtain a little bit from someone who's lived it. As a general manager for 9 years with the Toronto Blue Jays, but as a longtime front office, important part of Oakland and the Mets and the Giants, and a guy who's one of our own, J.P. Ricciardi, Worcester's own, who's back now and has done some Woo Sox games for Nesson, does a really nice job on his podcast now, the Brush Back with J.P. Ricciardi. Perfect time to dig into what goes into these decisions. Let's welcome in former general manager J.P. Ricciardi on the 310 to Left podcast. All right, it is trade deadline season. In fact, we're right up against the deadline now, and no better time to have a former general manager who also understands the pressure of baseball in Boston because he grew up here as one of us. J.P. Ricciardi with us. J.P., how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. What are the last 24 hours leading into the trade deadline like for a general manager? Like, we hear so much about deals that are almost done, and you've been doing this for days and weeks, but now the deadline is looming. What was that like for you in those years in Toronto?
This has never happened to me, but sometimes it would be comparable to someone being left at the altar. It's really, you could do so much work and get this thing to the 1 yard line, and then another team gets cold feet, or they don't like the medical. That happened with us in New York one time with Brandon Nimmo. They didn't like the medical. We were trading him to Cincinnati. So it's almost like that last few hours before the deadline is absolutely done, people start getting just wiggy about things. And all it takes is one guy on their end to walk in the room and say, I don't know, I thought about this overnight, and then it's like you're back to ground zero. And it can get very, very frustrating.
Is there any sleep? I mean, are you literally just up for 2 days leading up to it?
What happens is, you get to a point where you've dealt with these teams before. You know who's serious and who isn't serious. I mean, no one's calling you at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to make a deal. I think for the most part, it's a pretty normal day. You probably end at midnight, but in respect to the West Coast teams. But after doing it for so long, you've got a pretty good feel if something's going to get done.
Did you ever have a complete reversal in terms of buy-sell in those last 24, 48 hours? Like you hear stories maybe, or like what's the kind of the furthest out that you're like, this is our direction, we're going for it? Or where, but by which maybe we're going for selling off our veterans and trading Carlos Beltran for Zach Wheeler.
Right. So I'll give you the best one that I could come up with, where we're in New York for 4 years, and we've got no money. We're not doing anything. We're really kind of floundering, and we're playing really well. And Sandy calls me up, and he says, Sandy Alderson calls me up and says, we got a chance to trade for Cespedes. I said, what are you waiting for? He goes, well, it's this, it's that. I said, Sandy, trade for Cespedes. We need a bat. He could put us over the hump. We're 3 games out of the East. Washington's not playing real well. They're coming in this weekend. I said, it's a great opportunity. He goes, well, they want Fulmer. I said, so what? I said, just who cares? I said, Sandy, we got to make a stand at this point. We got to try to show the people that we're doing something. We might not be in this position again. So I won't mention the names, but 3 other guys in the organization said they wouldn't make the trade. So I said to the guys, I'm going to ask you this out of experience. Can you guarantee me next year that we're going to be in the same position with Fulmer? Because if you can guarantee me that next year, then I will tell you don't trade Fulmer. But for all the reasons I mentioned before, we need the bat. Long story short, a lot of arguments, a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming. We trade for Cespedes. Cespedes comes to the Mets. We sweep the Nationals at home, and we take off from there, and we go to the World Series. Now, I'm not saying every deal works out like that, but what I was taking into consideration, and Sandy hadn't been a GM for a long time. He had come back. I was trying to point out, Sandy, we've been terrible for 4 years. We're pretty good right now. We got to show that clubhouse and these fans we're trying to win. So what? If this kid ends up being a Cy Young Award winner, so be it. But we got to make a chance. We got to take a chance. And we pushed it through at the 11th hour, and we ended up getting it done. And he ended up being great for us.
I mean, just to clarify on that, had you guys even been considering sell possibilities like in the few days before that, or were you so close that it was going to be like, nah, we can't do that with our fan base and clubhouse?
What we were trying to do was minuscule improvements. So we traded for Kelly Johnson, we traded for Uribe, and they were nice additions. They were complimentary players, but we had a chance to step up and get a 3-hole hitter that was actually playing really well. Cespedes was good at the time. And if you go back and look at that run, he basically put us on his back and carried us. And not only that, we had a chance to sign him the next year for a 1-year deal, which Sandy asked me, what would you do? I said, 100% sign him. 1-year deal, we go to the playoffs again. Comes back and says he wants a 3-year deal. I said, I'm out at that point. But we gave him a 3-year deal. And that was he turned into just an injury-plagued player at that time. But no, we were trying. That was the one chance we had to get a home run, and that was my point. We don't have too many chances to get these home runs. Let's try to get it.
You said 3 words in there that I find intriguing. Show the clubhouse. You said we have to show the fans. We have to show the clubhouse. Now, each of the last 4 seasons, and that was the 4 years Chaim Bloom was chief baseball officer, right? There's been interesting decisions made at the trade deadline each time, right? Never really, it seemed to fans anyway, going all in, but never really going full fire sale to blow it up either. Each of the last 4 seasons, the Red Sox have had a losing record in August, which says the reaction to whatever it was or the lack of help led to a team that struggled in August. How important do you think it is for a team that, listen, and I'm not talking about Baltimore right now. I'm not talking about a team that's pretty sure it's going to the playoffs. They know they're all in. Right. The teams like the Mets are one of those. The Red Sox obviously are one of those. How much of a difference do you think it makes as a baseball executive to show the players who will be here in August that you are serious about this season?
That's a really good question. And I think what it comes down to is the makeup of your club better than anybody. The manager knows the makeup of that club better than anybody. You don't want to bring someone in just to bring someone in and take away. Like if you want to use the Red Sox as an example, they got a little bit of magic going on right now. Everybody knows their role. Everybody plays in that role. And Cora's doing an amazing job. They could definitely use a permanent guy to play second base. They could definitely use some more bullpen help. So what they have to weigh is, am I bringing in some supporting guys that are going to take the roles away from the guys that have been here all year? And is that going to make us kind of fragile in the clubhouse? Or are they seriously guys that are going to be upgrades? So I think when you can come to that clubhouse and tell them that we've upgraded, and, we did this in Oakland a ton. We did this in Toronto when we could, and we did this with the Mets. The Giants, forget it. That's a whole nother story. But I think if you are able to walk in that clubhouse and reward those guys for the amazing year they had by saying, we've upgraded, that sends so much energy through that clubhouse. And I've seen it on the reverse side when people hear all the trades, and then you walk in the clubhouse and there's no trades, and you could almost see these guys. It's like Christmas morning, like, where's my present? Like, you didn't do anything. We've been breaking our ass all year. We put ourselves in this situation. It's time for you to step up now, and you didn't. And it makes for a tough situation.
It's super interesting to hear you contrast the different experiences, the different front offices that you've been in. And, and when you talk about Cespedes and deciding that you were going to take the chance to hit a home run, like that's Sandy Alderson, one of like a Hall of Fame caliber executive in the history of baseball with decades of experience. Obviously you would work with Sandy and with Billy Beane in Oakland, guys who are really secure in what they're doing. And then, when you're talking about San Francisco, that's a first-time general manager in Farhan Zaidi. When you're looking at Boston and the criticism that they faced over the last couple of years, that's first-time chief baseball officer in Chaim Bloom. How much do you think relative? Is it more difficult to kind of embrace risk when you are kind of newer to that seat? Or are we just in a generation of executives that's a little bit more risk averse, that spend a lot of time thinking about the future value of prospects and how can you give up X over 6 years if you're only getting 3 months of upgrade?
All right, so you just hit like the Pandora box for me. I'm going to tell you what one of the biggest problems with front offices are today. They're so insecure that they're afraid to have baseball people around them. And when you go back and you look at all of these clubs that have had success, when we were in Oakland, we had baseball people around us. We went to the playoffs 7 times in my 16 years in Oakland. Sandy Alderson was an excellent GM, but not a risk taker. And Billy and I pushed Sandy to become more of a risk taker. So when I went to New York, I was the guy who pushed him to be a risk taker. What I think you have today in these front offices is you have a lot of young guys that are afraid because they don't have support around them telling them that this is a good deal. You need to make this deal. You can't be afraid to make this deal. And I remember to this day, you can ask Billy Beane this. I used to tell Billy all the time, Billy, I don't care what we're giving up if what we're getting back is what we want. So that means it's a good trade. They got what they want and we got what we want. And I carried that same philosophy into Toronto. And I think today, these younger front offices are really, really hurting themselves by not having a Bill LaJoy, a Jim Hendry, a Brian Sabian, an Omar Minaya, some of these older guys that have been through the wars, that have been through trading deadlines, that have been through drafts, that have been through evaluations of their minor league system. They're really hurting themselves by not having that guy in their corner.
I was listening to your podcast, and by the way, it's excellent. The Brushback with JP Ricciardi is terrific. You were talking the other day, and we all do it, right? You have the 3 tiers of teams. You know the buyers, you know the sellers. More and more, the vast majority of teams are somewhere in that middle, right? And trying to define where exactly are you in that middle is. And the Red Sox, as you said, they got a little magic going. Even though they've struggled out of the All-Star break, they're very much in the hunt. How difficult do you think it is for Craig Breslow and his group to determine, A, we're buyers, which they've done. They've added Paxton, they got Jansen, they got the catching help. But how all in are you willing to be on a team that, has been hovering around a 50% playoff probability most of the year? That's got to be the toughest decision of all, right?
Well, if you look at it, they're one of the teams that are they're in the greatest situation if you think about it. They have Teal, Anthony, and Meyer. They could hit a home run if they want to hit a home run. I'm not saying they're going to do that, and I wouldn't advise them to do that with those 3 players. But if they want, them and maybe the Orioles and the Dodgers have the farm system to say, if I want to go out and get the home run, I can get the home run. So with that being said, what the Red Sox have done a really good job of, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to do some games for Nesson on the AAA level to see their AAA team, they've got some supporting players down there that maybe they want to see in Boston, the Nick Yorks of the world, the Mydros of the world, but they also are pieces that could get them something, and they're not taking away from their big 3. So the Red Sox have, I would say, 3 groups of baskets that they can pull from. They have the big basket with the big prospects, the middle prospects in there, and then they've got the lower prospects that they can do whatever they want to do. So I'm happy to see that they brought Paxton in. I'm happy to see that they're trying to do things, but they still have the means to do whatever they want to do. So they're in an enviable position, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the next few days pan out for them.
Yeah, super interesting way of breaking it down, because I've kind of been thinking loosely in the same terms. With the guys who they've given up, the highest ranked prospect they've given up was Baseball America's number 18 guy in Edinson Paulino, and he's a guy who's a bit redundant because he's a left-handed bat, middle infielder, who's certainly behind Meyer, and even though they're right-handed, Roth up in AAA. I am curious for your sense. You mentioned second base is what you see as an area of need for the Red Sox in the big leagues. York plays second base. Meidroth plays second base. Vaughn Grissom is now rehabbing. Do you see a solution there, or do you think that it is really important for them, if they want to turbocharge this thing, to get a second baseman whose whether his ceiling is higher or his major league readiness is higher than those guys?
I think at this point you can't be playing with young players because they've got enough young players in the big leagues. So I think what they need to do is get someone who's more of I know he's been traded, but like a Whit Merrifield type guy, maybe a Khalifa up at Toronto, someone that's a veteran player that they know that they could put at second base, not have to try to put Wong at second base and take him away from what his strength is. I think when you're going into the trading deadline, on the receiving end, when you're in the race, it's all about getting proven players that can handle the pressure of a playoff race, especially coming to Boston. Boston is going to be so unforgiving on someone that's a young player. I mean, they'll love him, but they're not going to be real forgiving if it's the guy that's playing there and all of a sudden he's 1 for 30 and he's made 2 or 3 errors. So I think their best bet is to go get as many veteran players as they can. And even if it's just patching it together to get them through where they want to get.
Yeah, Red Sox have surprised a lot of people, right? Most people coming into the season had them finishing last in the American League East. But part of the surprising season is the fact that both Toronto and Tampa Bay have underachieved, right? Those seasons, we've seen Tampa Bay starting to sell off. I heard you say that on an appearance up in Toronto that you would blow it up now because that window of opportunity we thought was just starting for the Blue Jays seemed to close quickly. Would you move Guerrero? I mean, would you totally start from scratch up there?
I would try to move Guerrero as fast as I could because next year is the last year of his deal, if I'm right. What are you going to get from him next year? Now someone can get him. They can use him August, September, and then all into next year, and they can even try to extend him. So, and he's a guy. I know that you put him in somebody's lineup, he doesn't have to be the guy. I mean, just for argument's sake, I mean, what if the Yankees put him in their lineup? All of a sudden you got Soto, him, and Judge. Now you got 3 guys. So he would be a guy that I would, obviously I don't think they're going to move him, but he would be a guy that I think from a Blue Jay standpoint, you could get the most bang for your buck. Bichette, maybe because of the injuries, I don't think so. But once again, he's another guy that's only got a year left after this year. So I think those guys are going to end up dying on the vine if they don't move him.
So, and you mentioned the Yankees. Obviously, he's the kind of guy that would excite a Red Sox fan base, right? It would excite any fan base if you bring him in. When you were helping make these decisions, when you were making the decisions in Toronto, how much did a team in the division scare you away? How worried would you be about moving an impact guy within the division?
I traded Raul Mondesi to the Yankees. that didn't bother me because I got rid of $12 million. But I think one thing you have to keep in mind with all of this, and it's probably where we should have started in the beginning, is all of these trading deadlines are directed by ownership. So if ownership gives you an opportunity to add money, sometimes they'll give you your budget and say, listen, you want to leave $5 million for the trading deadline? If you think you're going to be in it, leave that. Sometimes they'll say, spend all your money now. You're not going to have any money later. So I don't know where some of these teams stand from a budget standpoint. But the one thing I found with budgets, if the major league team plays well, you got to almost push the budget to the side because they've forced your hand. It's like when your wife wants to buy something in the house and you tell her to spend this much and she says, oh, I can get this for this much more. You're not going to say no to her. So it's the same with the Red Sox, or any of these teams. And I don't know if you guys feel this way. And Alex, you're a little young, but Tom, the Red Sox remind me of the '67 Red Sox. They've got Devers, who to me is comparable to Yastrzemski, not all-around player, but having that type of year. Duran is playing like Canigliaro played before he got hurt. The rest of the team is Jerry Adair and Mike Andrews and Joe Foy and George Scotts. And Cora is just doing an amazing job of putting these guys all in positions to play. When I look at the Red Sox, I know I'm dating myself, but they very much remind me of the 67 Red Sox, and they got a lot of magic going right now. And I think anything they're able to go out and add is going to make them a better club.
I mean, that's a pretty incredible comp. I do think that in my more recent experience, I can't do 67, but certainly when you think about guys performing at the top end of what you project them to be, and even beyond that, then you're looking back at like the 2013 Red Sox, for instance, certainly, or it's. But I wonder whether or not that makes it easier or harder for a front office to make moves to reinforce them, right? Like when you're talking about magic, of a team in this like certain point in time, do you trust that the magic won't run out? Or if you have guys who are all performing beyond your expectations for them, do you commit to that and just say it's happening? Like, let's keep going with that wave. Or do you think like, oh man, like this wave is going to crash sometime on me and I need to be a little bit careful?
Well, when you're winning, you got to take advantage of winning because it doesn't come all the time. And I think the fact that the Red Sox are winning and getting so many contributions from so many different players, they're not relying on one magical guy playing out of his mind. They're getting contributions from so many different players that every night it's somebody different. Ref Snyder, Wong. I mean, I could go on and on. So they've got a collection of players that are, bringing something to the table every night and allowing them to win. So I would be more concerned if it was just two guys playing out of their mind and you're saying the shoe's going to drop on this guy. But I don't really see that. And it leads me back to my comparison about 67. They really had Jim Lomborg, and the rest of the staff was kind of like, hopefully you can get us, to the seventh or eighth inning. This staff, I think, needs some help, and I think the bullpen needs some help. I would probably lean, if I couldn't get an everyday player that could give me some consistency, I would probably lean toward building up as much bulk in that bullpen and another starter, which is why they went out and got Paxton. So I think the Red Sox are definitely a playoff team. I don't think that's going to go away. I don't think there's a slipper that's going to fall that you're going to say, oh my God, they're not really. The only thing I look at the Red Sox and I say is a little concerning is their schedule gets tougher.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it might be the toughest schedule the rest of the way, at least in the American League East. The thing about the 67, kids like Alex don't remember, like you said. But for those of us old enough to remember. But the other part of 67, right, the intangible part of 67 is, as you know, JP, and Alex, you certainly know, it built what is now Red Sox Nation, right? The magic of that team, even though they didn't win the World Series, that was the cornerstone that what we watched today was built upon. And as we all know, this ownership group, this franchise right now needs a reset of some sort, right? You felt the buzz over the weekend with the Yankees in town. 3 sellouts. It wasn't the Fenway experience. It was fans that were watching baseball, right. 2 really good games, 1 ugly game. I think, so I guess my question is, if trade deadline decisions are dictated by ownership, do you think this ownership sees this opportunity and says, we do something here this year, we make a little run in October, we're winning these fans back. Now these young players are coming into an atmosphere where fans are back into it and they're expecting. How important is that? How much does it factor in?
I think if they're watching what's happening, and I got to believe that they are, they've got to be caught up in it too. I mean, the Red Sox are a lot of fun. I never thought in February and March that I'd be sitting here going into August telling you that the Red Sox are a fun team to watch, but they actually are. And I think that ownership has got to be paying attention to that. And I'm sure that within reason, whether it's obviously not trading the big 3 prospects, but I'm sure if Breslow went to them and said, hey, I can move so-and-so and get so-and-so, I don't think this ownership group is going to say no to them. I think they realize that this is a magical year. I have to believe they're having fun, the ownership group, because they didn't expect this.
Right. So you mentioned the bullpen as an area of potential need. It has been striking, right? In the month of July, they have been pretty consistent. They have done a really nice job of turning 7th inning leads into wins through the first 3 months of the season. This month, they have blown 10th inning or later. That's their most in any single month since August of 2006, which was a downward spiral for them in what had been a very good year. Is that fixable? Like when you see that kind of or do you accept? Is that a one-off, or how hard is it to see a struggle that extreme and say no, that can be fixed?
Well, what's interesting is I think the one area that you see a team kind of get chipped away at and start, you could see their weakness is the bullpen in today's game. That's because the starters aren't pressed to go beyond 5 innings, and the bullpens in today's game are taxed. They're basically sometimes the 5th inning to the 9th inning. And when you look up and you start to get into August, these guys are accumulating a lot of innings. So not only are they accumulating those innings, but now they're being put on the mound, and some of their deficiencies, so to speak, start to show up the more they get on the mound. And that's why I think any influx of basically depth or stamina can help the bullpen and help them to be able to bridge the gap from those starters. Houck is starting to get innings he hasn't pitched before. I think Crawford's, getting close to maybe uncharted territory, so to speak. I really like the Paxton pickup for that reason, because I think he can hopefully get a little bit of relief for some of the starters and maybe take a little bit more pressure off them. But I think bullpens today are so taxed because they use so much. And, guys get into August, they're tired.
However, along those lines, right, like there's the worst trades in baseball history invariably revolve around bullpen arms, right? Like Jeff Bagwell for Larry Anderson. We all still talk about it. It's 27 years later. Your dog is talking about it. Like I understand the agitation.
That's Bruno.
Bruno, Heathcliff Slocum for Derek Lowe and Jason Varitek. Like obviously, great trade for the Red Sox. How are you surprised to see that once again we're seeing some pretty high prices? Multiple top 10 prospects moving at this year's deadline. In exchange for bullpen arms. We've already seen it with the Phillies sending 2, like number 5 and number 7 prospects to the Angels for Carlos Estevez. We've seen it with San Diego moving 3 top 10 guys to Tampa Bay for Jason Adam. Surprised?
Well, I don't get caught up in the rankings of these guys. It's like when you watch a college football game and they're telling you these guys are 5-star recruits, this guy was this, and then all of a sudden they're talking about all the walk-ons that are playing for him over the 5-star recruits. So I look at these rankings. Who's ranking them? The organization could tell you they're our 5th best player, but they might not even be the 5th best player. So prospects to me are it's evaluation of what you think they're going to be. I think it looks good on paper to your fans. I could say I got the 5th guy or the 7th guy, but in reality, most of these guys don't even pan out. So I look at it, does this player I'm getting back help my team? If this guy helps my team, I'm in a better place today than I was yesterday. Obviously, Bagwell for Larry Anderson, once in a lifetime trade, maybe. I don't think anybody thought Jeff Bagwell was going to be a Hall of Famer. So the key is in your own evaluation, you got to make sure you have enough people around you, which gets back to something I told you earlier. You got to have good baseball people around you that stop those trades for that reason. And you got to have good baseball people around you that tell you to make that trade because of our evaluation on this player. So I think you just got to be able to be open-minded and realize what you're giving up and realize what you're getting back.
So let me ask you this, JP. There was a time where Moneyball was revolutionizing baseball, right? And you were part of that in Oakland, and there were advantages to what you were able to do. To an extent, everyone's got their own proprietary version, but they're essentially analyzing the same numbers, right? And I feel like, and you talk to some baseball people, and they will say, one of the toughest things that stands in the way of getting a deal done is we're all sort of coming to the same decisions, right? So is that paralyzing the game? Are we not seeing as many deals because everyone's sort of saying, well, no, because you're going to get an advantage and we all can see that?
You guys are really trying to get me going today. The biggest misnomer with Moneyball was we had no money. So we had to be creative. And we weren't creative as analytically as Billy tried to make it look like with Michael Lewis in the book. I could give you a list of all the players we signed, whether it was 6-year free agents, waiver claims, trades, throw-ins, whatever, that were just baseball evaluations. And I know because I was doing the evaluating. The Matt Stairs of the world, the Tailgaters of the world, the Buddy Grooms of the world, the Carlos Reyeses of the world, the Geronimo Peñas of the world. I could give you a list. Those were baseball evaluations. Those weren't anything analytic. So today, all these guys are so analytically driven that they're afraid to give up anything because they're afraid to get hurt. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. The kid who's tearing it up right now, Tyler Fitzgerald with the Giants. I begged Farhan to put him on the roster 2 years ago. I said, Farhan, all I could tell you is if someone like me was out scouting the way we used to scout, and I saw a shortstop that could run, had power, and could possibly play center field, and he's unprotected, I'm Rule 5ing him. We can't risk losing this kid. They didn't protect him. They were so lucky. No one claimed him because no one's out scouting anymore. You got guys inside reading stats. They didn't claim him. The guy, and I put on my report, this guy's going to be a future all-star in the American League or the National League. He's got that type of talent. Now he's tearing it up in San Francisco. But they had no evaluation from inside. They didn't want to listen to anybody inside. They went strictly by the numbers. They thought he struck out a little bit too much. And so we're paralyzing organizations because there's no other identity that brings an evaluation to the table that they pay attention to. That's my Moneyball spiel.
We should probably have a separate.
Nerve. It hits a nerve with me because people think we were sitting there. We only had like 10 people working for us. Who could do all this that they said we were doing?
We should probably have a separate episode on just Moneyball. But so I guess I kind of as we train our thoughts on 6 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm curious, like, what's the fastest that a trade can come together? Like, how crazy is that last hour or last 2 hours? When does it really get like just into the boiler room insanity of the whole thing?
Well, I think Tom hit it on the head. The reason it doesn't get like that anymore is because it's paralysis by analysis. And these guys have got to work so long on running all their algorithms and running this and running that. There's no one in the room that says, make the trade. It's all, well, the algorithms today said not to do this. So I don't think it's as frenetic as you think it is. I think these are buildups. And there's organizations that you don't even want to deal with because it's laborious to make a trade. And I've made trades with so many guys, the Brian Sabians, the Doug Melvins. Those guys were so easy to work with. John Sherholtz. They were baseball people. They told you what they wanted. You told you what you wanted. Boom, boom, boom. Trade was done in 2 days. Doesn't happen today. So I think goes back to what Tom said. And I keep coming back to which organization is so analytically driven, they're dominating our game. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen one team rattle off, 3 out of 5 world championships, 5 out of 6 world championships. So I just keep coming back to, I understand analytics are important. I understand that they have a part in our game, and I understand that you can get some pluses from it. But I don't see where it's dominating our game. And if anything, it's made our game a little boring.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Good stuff. That's why we're going to have you on for the trade deadline show. We got an hour more of this coming on Tuesday afternoon. JP, that was great stuff. We really appreciate the visit. Going to be fun, no doubt about that. And it's great seeing you back here in New England on Ness and doing those Blue Sox games, doing some with us now coming up as well. So it's going to be a blast. Thanks for the time.
Oh, anytime. Good seeing you guys. Always my pleasure.
Great to see you, JP. All
right. Not many guests have called Alex Young either, so you'll probably get invited back now that you.
I remember when he started.
Good stuff, JP. Thanks. The great JP Ricciardi with us as we wrap up this edition. 3:10 to left. We'll catch you again next time. Thanks for listening.